I sat by my mother's hospital bed, clutching the white blanket tightly. The room was deathly quiet. The monitor hummed steadily, the fluorescent lights were cold and tense. "Mom, I'm here," I called out to myself, then gently bent down to stroke her wrinkled hand. While Los Angeles was still asleep, I flew more than 3 hours straight to Seattle to care for my mother. Her name was Margaret Park, 72 years old, a former elementary school teacher, always warm and gentle with her students. But now, at Harborview Hospital, she was just lying motionless, breathing heavily and weak. I, John Park, did not leave her side for a moment. My family used to be peaceful. My mother taught me the first lesson of filial piety. My father died early, and my sister and I grew up relying on each other. My sister Emily was always indifferent to family matters. She said she was busy with work in San Diego. My husband's parents were also busy. Occasionally, there was a hastily signed "Get Well Soon" card. That was it. On the third day of my mother's hospitalization, I realized how lonely I was. Every time I ran to get a glass of water or asked the nurse to change her diaper, no one else was in sight. The benches in the hallway were empty. I brushed my teeth and ate a cold dinner in the waiting room. I couldn't hear footsteps passing by in the hallway. The feeling of abandonment overwhelmed me. Mother smiled weakly when she saw me return. "You just rest," she managed to say, her voice hoarse, but I shook my head, grabbing the creaking metal chair beside her. "I won't leave you for half a minute." I took her hands. My heart sank when I saw her frail hands shaking. The pressure was getting heavier. Every time a doctor passed by, I jumped up and asked, "Doctor, how is my mother?" They just nodded and continued walking. I understood they were busy with other emergencies, but inside me was a sea of anxiety. On Thursday night, as a cold wind blew through the window of my hospital room, I was startled awake by a knock on the door. Carson, the night shift worker, entered, his face solemn. He held a cream-colored envelope in his hand. "John, I have something to tell you." His voice was low. I sat up, my heart pounding. The envelope had my name and my mother's and no seal. Curiosity invaded every corner of my mind. I counted on my fingers, trying to calm down. "Doctor, what's in here?" Mr. Carson looked at me momentarily, then said, "This is Margaret's last words. She wanted you to read them when she was completely stable." His voice was choked. My hands shook as I held the envelope. Seattle's golden autumn was falling outside, but an unexpected storm was raging. Inside my head, why was Mom writing this? She had never mentioned a will. Did she know her illness was more serious than we thought? Or was there some secret in her past that made her prepare for everything? I looked at my mother, her eyes still half closed. Her steady breathing was a reminder, stay calm. I folded the envelope carefully and placed it neatly on the bedside table. "Thank you, Doctor. I will read it when necessary." Mr. Carson nodded slightly and quietly left. The room fell silent again. I hugged my elbows and leaned back in my chair. For the first time, I felt like I was not just a dutiful son, but also shouldering a responsibility I had never imagined. The envelope was both a promise and a warning. Then I leaned down and whispered, "Mom, I will be with you until the last second. I will not let anything happen." In that moment, I understood that the letter would change everything. Not just my future, but possibly our family's past. And so my journey begins. A journey to uncover the secret in the letter, to face the truth, and to protect the woman who has devoted her life to me. What lies ahead? That is the story yet to be told. My hand was still tightly gripping the envelope, my breathing was rapid. I took a deep breath, looked up at my mother again, and gently tore the seal. The piece of paper inside was pure white. The handwriting was thin but decisive. "My dear son, John." My head was pounding as I read the first few lines. She recounted memories of our childhood, the mornings my mother took me to school, the times when I was sick with a fever, and she knelt at the foot of my bed to pray. She also wrote about a secret that the family had never mentioned. My biological father, whose name I had never known, was a retired Marine who died shortly after giving birth to me. My mother kept it a secret so I wouldn't be heartbroken. The following line piqued my eyes. She asked me to forgive everyone. Mom understood that the remaining members were estranged from her because of old conflicts and financial burdens. She asked me not to resent them. But what shocked me most was the part of the will the entire house in Bellevue and the assets accumulated from her years of teaching would be left to me alone with a straightforward condition. John, you continue to take care of your sister if she truly wants to come back. But you can live your life if she chooses to remain silent. My heart was crushed. My sister, who had left my mother in the hospital because she missed the deadline, was now given a final chance by my mother. And the other siblings, they were not in the will. My mother had chosen me the child standing alone for the past few days. I looked up, my eyes looking around the room. Fragments of memory flooded back my sister's lifeless, "Get well soon." Cards, my cousin's delayed promise to visit the empty chair in the waiting room every time I tiredly lay down. All of it was meaningless to my mother. I closed the letter and placed it on my mother's chest. She kept her eyes closed and breathed evenly. Her heartbeat reminded me, "Don't cry, don't falter." I sat up straight, my eyes determined. "Mom, I understand. I will do as you say." The next morning, I video called Emily from the hospital hallway. She appeared exhausted, her hair falling over her shoulders. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Hey, Mom has a letter for us." She raised an eyebrow. "What letter, John? Is Mom okay?" Her voice was indifferent. I hesitated. "Mom, she wrote a will. You should go to the hospital." I saw her startled at that moment, then turned off the video. My heart ached. I knew she wouldn't come because if she did, she would have shown up the night before when Mom was thirsty. So much pent-up frustration, I dialed my youngest sister, Lisa. She was in Portland on a business trip. After a ring, her voice rang out, "Brother," I tried to hold back my tears. "Mom has a letter, come home." This time, Lisa was silent for a long time. Finally, she nodded and promised to book a flight that afternoon. A hope arose in my heart, at least my sister would come back. Returning to my mother's bedside, I gently put the phone down. I bent down to reread the letter, pondering each word. In my mind, my mother echoed, "Take control of your life, don't let blood ties tie you down." I continued to stand watch throughout the afternoon. The hallways were quiet with only a few medical colleagues passing by. I gazed out the window, lost in thought, and saw the Seattle Center Tower rising above the gray, silent city. About 2 hours later, hurried footsteps sounded near the door. I turned around and saw Lisa staggering with her suitcase, her eyes red. She ran over, hugged me, and cried, "Brother, I'm sorry." I wrapped my arms around my sister. All resentment melted away. We sat together listening to our mother's still beating heart. Her letter was not just a treasure but a chance for us to reconcile. But there is a long way to go how to make people understand what she meant, how to preserve her memory and legacy. The storm of emotions had just subsided when my sister appeared, but soon new challenges arose. On Thursday afternoon, the sunset was coloring the leaves outside the hospital window, and Lisa and I walked into the room. Margaret was lying there, her face still pale, but her eyes opened when she saw her youngest sister. "Mom," Lisa whispered, her voice choked. She struggled to raise her hand, using all her remaining strength to stroke her daughter's hair. In that moment, all the pain seemed to burst. The two sisters fell silent, bent down to hold their mother's hand and shed tears together. The faint smell of antiseptic in the air became strangely warm. After the shock, I had to get up and do the legal paperwork. The small desk beside my bed was piled with paperwork and a notarized will. I called my mother's attorney a small office in Bellevue to set up a date for the signing. It had to happen quickly because the doctor said my mother would need to be on strict medication control and the will would only be valid when she was sober enough. Lisa looked at me, her eyes filled with worry. "What do you think about this, Mom? Just left everything to you?" I sighed, trying to calm down. "That's what Mom means. After everything she and our brother have done, Mom wants me to have a chance to come back, but if I don't want to, Mom will give everything to you." The younger sister bowed her head silent. She was both angry and hurt. For many years she had only prioritized work away from her family, and now when her grandmother was seriously ill, she had realized what was most important. "Brother, I will be here." The simple words were enough to make me feel sorry. But outside in the hallway, the invisible chatter of relatives had begun. An uncle was negotiating money over the phone. A few close neighbors were asking around to count out who else would inherit. News of my mother's letter spread like wildfire. I knew I had to act wisely to protect my mother's last wishes. The next day, under the bright white lights, I led Lisa to a small conference room in the hospital where her lawyer was waiting. Lawyer Park, who was in charge of her mother's estate, nodded slightly when he saw us. He called it a special family meeting in a medical setting. We signed the document confirming the will would be opened when Margaret could. I felt somewhat burdened, partly by the new responsibilities and partly by the fear that if Mom died before the will was completed, the will might be invalid. But I had promised Mom and I would keep my word. When I returned to the hospital room, I tried to create a cozy atmosphere. I pulled the curtains a little to keep the sunset from being too harsh, put a vase of baby's breath on the table, and played the soft piano music my mother used to love. She turned her head and smiled faintly as if she realized I was trying. Lisa sat by the small coffee maker in the hallway that night, looking at me intently. "Do you regret having to shoulder everything?" I sipped my coffee, letting the warmth spread in my heart. "It's tiring sometimes, but Mom taught us that responsibility is a blessing." We looked at each other in silence, sharing a feeling of fear and hope. Even though our family was broken at this moment, we could still be reunited because of our motherly love. However, the door to the hospital room opened slightly, revealing the eldest sister, Emily, after many days of being busy. She walked in, her hair combed to her shoulders, her eyes scrutinizing. An awkward moment of silence filled the air. Emily looked at her mother, then at the two of us, tears welling up in her eyes, but her voice trying to remain calm. "Mom, how did you know about this?" Lisa and I both stood up, our hearts pounding. The tension was at its peak. Was Emily truly remorseful? Or had she come to claim the rest of the inheritance? My sister's reaction and how we deal with this unexpected return will determine the fate of our family and the future of our mother's legacy. In the sequel, our deepest secrets will be revealed, and the most difficult choices will lie in our hearts. Emily's footsteps came like thunder in the silence. She hesitated in the doorway, her shoulders hunched, then forced a smile. "Hi, Mom," she said softly, stepping closer. Emily's eyes swept over her frail figure and settled on us, the two children still standing guard by the bed. I swallowed, my heart pounding. "You know about the letter?" I asked quietly, my eyes still following her every move. Emily bit her lip, twisting the strap of her bag. "John, Lisa called me last night," she mumbled. Lisa nodded stiffly. "I'm here for Mom." Silence fell heavy in the room. Outside, the setting sun cast long shadows on the cold tiles. Finally, Emily looked up. Tears glistened in her eyes, but her voice was steady. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. Work. Life took me away." She bent down and squeezed her mother's hand. "Mom, I regret it." Mom opened her eyes slightly, trying to smile. She nodded weakly as if to say, "I understand." I stepped forward, arms crossed. "She chose this to give us a chance," I said, my voice even. "The will only divides if someone truly wants to come back." That's what matters." Emily sighed, her eyes welling up with tears. "I know. Apologies don't take away the pain. But I'm here now." In that moment, I realized love is not just empty words, but the sleepless nights by my mother's bedside, the hand that held her when she was scared. She needed us, and now she has enough. Emily looked at me, her voice choked up. "Please, give me a chance to help." I nodded slightly. "We'll sign the papers tomorrow. For now, just stay by my side." She exhaled, joy and regret written all over her face. She sat on the edge of the bed stroking her mother's hair while Lisa held her other hand. The three of us formed a loving circle around our beloved woman. That evening, we shared memories we thought we had forgotten. The times Mom took us out on the lawn, Emily hid her difficulties in college. Lisa's worries about pursuing her passion for art. The laughter was hesitant but warm. Mom looked at us, her eyes sparkling with happiness. A moment later, when she had settled her mother, Emily paused in the doorway. Her shadow was faint against the hallway wall. "Thank you," she whispered to me, "for not pushing me away forever." I just smiled half-heartedly. "We'll get through this together." Leaving the room, I glanced back at my sleeping mother. The road ahead was still arduous legal proceedings, family gossip, hope, and anxiety intertwined. But tonight, sitting by the flickering light, I felt less alone. Tomorrow, we will finalize our will. But tonight, in the fragile peace, our three children have realized the most precious things our mother has given us: family, love, forgiveness, and the chance to start over. The story is still unfinished, but now we are ready to write the following pages with faith and love as our mother would have wanted. Early the next morning, the gentle sunlight filtered through the curtains. I woke my mother up to prepare for the will signing in the hospital conference room. Margaret smiled when she saw me, her eyes still dazed, but her hand held mine tightly to give me strength. Lisa and Emily stood beside me silent, but their eyes filled with determination. Lawyer Park arrived on time, carrying a notarized set of documents. He placed the will on the table, looked at the three of us, and said, "We will carry out Mrs. Park's wishes." His voice was solemn but warm, as if comforting. I jumped when I heard the words "wish," feeling nervous and relieved. Emily, the eldest, was the first to sign. Her pen was shaking, but she tried to keep her handwriting neat. Lisa was next, nodding to her mother before signing. It was my turn, my heart pounding, as my pen touched the last page. As I signed, the lawyer tapped the table. "Congratulations. The will is complete." I couldn't believe I had just marked the beginning of a new chapter for my family. When I returned to my mother's room, I gently placed the copy of her will on the nightstand. She looked at us, her eyes filled with tears of joy. Her frail appearance suddenly brightened, as if she had been relieved of her last burden. My younger and older sisters threw their arms around her, and all three of us burst into tears. It was the most sacred moment I had ever experienced, not because of the Bellevue villa or the savings my mother had left me, but because of the bond that had been restored. My mother had used her will to force us to sit together, to give each of us a chance to reflect on the most essential thing in life. That afternoon, my two younger siblings and I took my mother for a walk in the hospital yard. The chirping of birds and the cool breeze made everyone feel lighter. My mother leaned on a cane, a little weak, but still smiling gently. I gently held her hand, listening to her whisper, "I have my freedom now." I nodded, feeling complete and happy. A few days later, when Mom's health was more stable, a small family meeting was held at the old house in Bellevue. Mom chose to have it here so that everyone could reminisce. The setting was cozy with rustic wooden tables and chairs, family photos on the wall, and a window overlooking the flower garden Mom had personally planted. Mom's eyes shone with pride as her three children sat together chatting animatedly. I took the initiative to speak during the meeting. Mom gave us a second chance. Let's work together to preserve this home no matter what happens." Emily had tears in her eyes. Lisa smiled and nodded in agreement. Every word was sincere, spontaneous from the hearts of children who had been separated. The day ended with laughter and warm hugs, something we thought we had lost. I looked up and saw my mother standing by the door. Her figure thin, but her gait majestic, like the gentle leader of the family. Life continues with its usual hustle and bustle work plans and new challenges. But I know that no matter how difficult the road ahead is, love and understanding will always be the destination. Mom's letter and will are not just legal documents, but a testament to family values, honesty, and faith in motherly love. Thank you for accompanying me and my family on this emotional journey. If you also believe that family is the most sacred thing, please give me a like and share the video so that many people can feel it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the following ordinary but powerful stories. I'm John. See you in the following video.